Hello?
There's one viewer supposedly. Zero.
You got a real keyboard. It's working.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hi, who's there? So we do think that two people are there, but if you could go into the chat and say you're there, then we could start working some of the questions. Here's Rayanne.
Is it random? Hey, are you the other viewer?
I'm not kidding, yeah.
We had to change the link. It wasn't working on the old one.
Okay.
If you got the new link, it should be live.
Did you, what's the new link?
I posted it in the discussion post. Are there people in the other
I
link?
can't access this discussion post. That also resolves to like a page that doesn't exist.
The discussion? What?
The discussion post from your email?
Go get your laptop. Oh, did you send email?
Yes.
But just to her, you didn't send email to everybody, did you?
She verified, but I checked the discussion link. It does work. I wonder if it's not like enrolled or she won't be able to see it because she's not verified. So of course she wouldn't.
That's fine. Okay.
She wouldn't be able to see
Okay,
it.
we're up to 3 viewers. So if you are viewing, then go ahead and go into the chat, which I guess you go to the left here and you to the left edge and you type on the blue box with the lines in it. And then you go to the lower right and you can just say hello. Bigger, I can't type.
Are there questions in the discussion post? No one's here.
I don't know if anybody's listening.
Sure, but we're gonna post it after.
You're gonna edit and post it?
You probably can't see it because you're not verified. That's probably why the link isn't in here. But if you just go to the discussion post, you should be able to see it.
Okay, well, it looks like we have 3 viewers now, even though I don't know who they are exactly. I think what I'll do is I'll start going through some of the questions. But I do encourage you to speak up if you're out there so that we can make it be more of a conversation. Part of the idea is that this would be a conversation. But I do encourage you to speak up if you're out there so that we can make it be more of a conversation. Part of the idea is... But how do I hear that?
It's probably open in the other window.
Pardon?
I think it's open in the other window.
What's open the other?
Like, because you open the YouTube, and then it goes to Hangouts, so it's playing itself back to you. It should be fine.
But how am I going to hear them?
They don't speak, they should type.
Oh. Okay.
Print stuff.
It won't tell me who the viewers are.
Not unless they speak.
Or type.
In here, are you in studio? You must not be able to see it because I'm not verified. Can you go into that other one now?
Okay, I'm just going to proceed with some of the questions that were posted online because nobody's using in the chat, but we do have 4 viewers, so somebody's there, and I'll just proceed with some of these questions. These questions were posted by somebody named somebody whose username is Reality Distorter, but they sign their message as Andrew, so I'll just assume they're called Andrew. One of the questions had to do with the recipes we're learning break a problem down into smaller pieces. And in fact, we say well-chosen smaller pieces. And Andrew wanted to know, in what sense are they well-chosen? A couple different answers to that, and then we'll see them more as we go through the course. The design method which we build on, which is from the How to Design Programs Volume 2 book and the How to Design Programs Volume 1 book, that work is based in part on results from type theory and in part on work in software engineering, in part Michael Jackson's work in software engineering, but other kinds of work. What you'll see in the second part of part 2, hang on, Erica's telling me to stop talking.
Are we in my account on here instead? No, we are. Okay, it should be fine.
Okay, now Erica says I can keep talking.
Something's weird though. Keep going. Where is that?
Wait, did you
It doesn't
briefly?
show up.
Oh, I know why. This is the, I'm going to close this window. That's not the, I'm going to close this one. This is the viewing window,
Yeah,
right?
that is the viewing window.
I'm going to close that. And then I can unmute.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So one thing that we'll see in this in part 2 of the How to Code course is that some of what we're doing based on type theory will cause our functions, in particular when we get to recursive functions, our recursive functions, to be broken down in such a way that it's very easy to write new functions that operate on large data. And that's basically going to be by having it use recursive types in a way that's well-founded. Some of the work in the way data definitions work and how we organize functions to follow data definitions, a lot of the work in data definitions is based on this really important point from Michael Jackson about first understand the information and then represent it as data. And following that stricture tends to localize some of the code that copes with the representing and interpreting data definitions. We'll also see there's a little bit of work based on what Karl Lieberher called the law of Demeter, having to do with when you make a new function to help. So all of that will play out a bit as we go forward. I realize that in a self-paced course, different places in the course, but most of this will really start to become explicit in part 2 of the course, and so we can take it up again then. Well, there's an interesting question here. Question 4, the primitive function string to number converts a string containing just a number, for example, the string with 4 and 2 in it, to the contained number, but it produces false if the string doesn't contain a number, instead of producing an error. See, and I'll use the chat window, is that we'll start doing this later in the course more, that we're going to let you write signatures that look something like this. So this might say number or false. And so we'll let you take a signature, take a type that a function is going to produce and add or false to it. That's all we're going to let you add to it. It's or false. It's not or true. It's not or anything else. It's or false. And what that does is it simulates in this very simple language we have a sort of simple form of what in a more sophisticated language would be called exception handling. And it's kind of way of saying, basically this function is going to either produce a number or it's going to tell you that it failed. And that's what the or false does. In the full Racket language that has exceptions, or in a lot of other languages that have an exception mechanism, you would handle this a different way. But this is one of the things that we've done to keep the beginning student language quite simple so that we can really focus on the design. Question 6 was, suppose we were designing a program to manage ticket sales for a theater that had various oddly shaped seat sections with different numbers of rows in each section and different numbers of seats in each row. And the question is, looking ahead a bit, what sort of structure or data type might we use to represent that kind of domain information? A tree or a list of lists? Yeah, I mean, and that's a great question. And in fact, we're going to see some data structures like that. We sometimes in our class here do a triangle solitaire game. Triangle solitaire is a game in which the top row has 1 peg and the next row down has 2 and 3 and so on. And so the rows are different shapes. And there's a variety of different ways to handle something like that. In a case like triangle solitaire where the geometry is completely regular, you can use some math to get you out of that. But in the case, for example, of a theater that has an irregular seating pattern, you would do exactly what you're saying. You would make some kind of map, maybe some list of lists. So there'd be a list of the rows, and each row would have a list of its positions. And then you could sort of know for any row how many seats were in it. You'd probably actually, in a real scheduling program, want to do something a bit more sophisticated than that, because you'd probably want to actually know where the seats are. For example, you might want to know that even though their numbers are different, 205 is actually right behind 107 or something. So you'd probably have to have a slightly more sophisticated representation of that information. Erica came out and said that it is actually working, and we're up to 6 viewers, but no one has used the chat feature yet. So again, people have used the chat feature. It's just not showing up on my screen. Okay, so if you guys were here, check this out. It's only taking a grand total of 3 computers for this thing to actually work. Bruce is here. Andrew's here. Andrew, I assume, is the reality distorter Andrew. All right, I've done a couple of Andrew questions. Now Bruce has a question. Let me try to address that. Will the later courses in the MicroMasters continue the somewhat unusual features that we are using now, i.e. HTDF, HTDD, recursion, and so on? Yes and no. Let's do the no first. Those features are in fact not unusual at all. What HTDF and HTDD capture is basic principles of program design that you should follow forever. Whether you'll call them HTDD or HTDF, you might not do that. You might not even do that by the time you get to the first 2 HTC courses. But let's just think about for a second what HTDF says. HTDF says, you know, you should figure out what this function does, and you should figure it out in individual pieces. And one thing that's nice to figure out is the types it consumes and the type it produces. And another thing that's nice to figure out is kind of a one-line description. And another thing that's nice to figure out is some examples of what it does. And it's also good to capture those as tests. And you can tell yourself a lot about the function using something called the template. And then you could fill in the details. That has absolutely nothing to do, in particular, with BSL or with this course. Real programmers do that all the time. What you're going to see as programs get bigger, as they get much bigger and more complicated, is that the template step in particular gets much more sophisticated. So at the end of part 2, when we write game playing programs like a Sudoku solver, the templating gets a lot more sophisticated. But there still is this notion, and real programmers use this all the time, of saying, okay, I'm about to write this function. Do I know anything about the basic shape of the function that I can write down first before I get to the details? And that is a thing that, that you can do in any language. There's a whole body of work called design patterns, which basically design patterns are kind of like templates. You're saying, you know, this piece of code works kind of like this. Let me put that down first, and then let me adjust for the details. So you'll keep using these ideas in any language. All HTTP says is, you know, the big insight in HTTP is Michael Jackson's insight that you should first focus on information and representing the information as data. And the thing he says is, if you don't focus on the information first, then you're going to let the solution, the data, interfere with your understanding of the information. That's true in any language that you work in. And there's nothing unusual about recursion at all. Recursion is the simplest way to operate on multi-level structure like trees. It turns out if you learn to do that with recursion first and you later have to back out, it's much simpler than going in the other direction. Now, what is true is that in the next course in the MicroMasters, in course 3, you'll switch to Java. And in Java, the nature of data definitions and the nature of templates changes considerably to be more Java-like. But the basic idea that a class, for example, in Java represents information, that's there, it just does it differently. The basic idea that every method is based on a template is there. It's just that the templates, in particular the templates for operating on arrays and lists, are different. But I think you'll see that these basic ideas, you know, you'll build on throughout the MicroMasters and throughout any language you learn. Any other questions? Does anybody else have another question? Or Bruce, was that, did that answer work for you? Do you have more to ask about it? I'll pick up another one of Andrew's questions if nobody else has a question. Andrew gave us a good set of questions to start with. So Andrew's got another question that says, it is advised to use strings for each distinct value in an enumeration. One of the advantages of using strings is they help to make the interpretation more straightforward. Wouldn't it therefore also be advisable to use strings for the distinct items of an itemization for the same reason? In the itemization part 1 video, however, Gregor chooses to use false to represent the countdown state, corresponding to not yet started. Wouldn't a string such as not started be more appropriate here and easier to interpret? Or is this just a matter of taste and judgment? Andrew is an extremely careful watcher of the videos, which is great. Usually, I think when we do an itemization in which there's only one distinct subclass, we often use false, or later we'll use empty, to just kind of say, this is the special case, this is the empty case, this is the terminal case. I do think there's some examples in the course, I can't think of one just now, where we have itemizations with multiple atomic subclasses, multiple distinct atomic subclasses, and in those cases, I think we use strings. So for the New Year's countdown, you could just as well have the string not yet started, and that might actually be an easier piece of code to read. I'm looking at Erica.
There are no new comments yet. Oh, Bruce says it answers this question.
YouTube wouldn't let me submit.
They can post on the discussion post if they can't.
So if you can't post with YouTube, then go into the edX site and go to that pinned verified virtual online office hours post and just add a response there and we'll read it. Okay, Alfonso has joined us now. Hello. Do you have a question for us? I still got a couple from Andrew, but I'm going to save those. I'm going to refresh over here on the edX site. So you can go to that pinned post in the edX course and submit there.
This person asked if you advise they learn Java in advance. Did you have to?
Oh, here's another question from Andrew. Andrew wants to know, would you advise that we learn some Java in advance? This is a great question, and we get this question a lot. I'm looking at Erica, who is the mastermind behind the MicroMasters. We get this question a lot here. You could learn some Java in advance if you want, or you don't have to. One of the things that we're going to try to do in parts 3 and 4 of the MicroMasters is help you learn how to really quickly learn a language. The story that I like to tell is when you get your first job, you'll interview for the job and you'll get hired and they'll say, okay, well, you're going to start in maybe 6 weeks and you'll be working in Ruby on this kind of program. And you get there 6 weeks later and you've studied Ruby and you're all set and you say, I'm all set, I know Ruby. And they say, oh, Ruby is so 6 weeks ago. Actually, you need to program in Python. My point just being, in this business, you learn new programs and new languages all the time. You have to kind of be able to read a program in a language you don't know and have that work. And so in the MicroMasters, we're going to have some videos that are explicitly designed to help you learn that. So I guess what I'm saying is, in some sense, the 3rd and 4th courses of the MicroMasters will be easier if you pre-learn some Java. On the other hand, you'll get more out of them if you don't pre-learn some Java because you'll go through that experience. Either way is fine. Okay, so Bruce has a question. Bruce has already gone through a large part of the course. And his question is, has to do with the recursive functions and in particular the idea of trusting the natural recursion. Bruce says, I find it difficult to combine the other elements of the function with the natural recursion. Hard for me to be specific about my difficulties, but any suggestions? If I call up Racket, can I show it?
Yep.
Okay, we're going to try to bring up, why don't you at least find your Racket? I'm going to try to address, this is an excellent question that Bruce has, and I'll just take a second to try to bring up. Oops. Okay, so let's suppose that we're doing, if you haven't gotten to this point in the course, please don't go away. Let's suppose we're doing list of number to number, maybe max. Produce largest, I'm going to do sum of elements. And let's just assume we've got a list of number type up here somewhere. And so the stub is, and the check expects or something like check expect. It's a recursive function operating on a list, so the first test should be the base case, and we'll just decide it's 0. The base case for adding up numbers is 0. And check expect sum cons 2, cons 3, cons 1 empty is 6. Okay. And I'm actually going to also do one slightly simpler case. I'll just do cons 1 and empty adds up to 1. Run the test to make sure they're well formed. They are, because they fail. I comment out the stub. And what I would do now is go get the template for list of number, but pretty soon you'll have the template for list of number memorized. So you could just type it. Whoa, your square brackets are funny. Empty lawn is ... else ... first of lawn, sum rest of lawn. Okay, so now Bruce's question has to do with using the natural recursion. But let's do the simple thing first. I look here, I look at these dots, I'm trying to fill them in, and I say to myself, well, I know I have to produce a number. I get that from the signature. I know it has to be the sum of all the elements in the list, but the list is empty. And this example tells me when the list is empty, I produce 0. So I'll put 0 here. And what I could even do now is run this, and you'll see that it actually, that test ran because this is the test that got an error. So that first test actually ran. What I could do is comment these 2 tests out and run it again, and the first test is passing. So my base case is good. Ooh, that's not what I meant to do. Now the question is, how do I use the natural recursion? So I'm sitting here saying, well, I got the first, da, da, da. So what I do sometimes is I do this. I say to myself, well, let's take this test case here. In this test case, first of lawn is 1. And rest of lawn is empty because there's the rest of the lawn. It's empty. Now, sum of empty is going to produce 0. So what I really have to do is combine 1 and 0. At this point, if I wanted to, I could go back up here and say, oh, I'm combining 1 and 0. So this is actually plus 1 and 0. Get me the thing I want. Oh, I see. I put plus here. And I run it and it works. I could have used this case too. It's just more complicated. If I use this case, then first of lawn is 2. And this is now the sum of cons 3, cons 1 empty. And that's 4. So if I wanted to, I could write here plus 2. And I could either write 4. At this point, I see, oh, I see. It's plus 2, plus 3, plus 1. Base case is 0. What I'm doing up here, up here, what I'm doing to the examples, we call this elaborating the examples. So that the examples show not only what the answer is, but how the answer is computed. And sometimes doing that can really help you down here, figuring out how to combine the first with the natural recursion. Oh, whose question was that? Okay.
Bruce.
Bruce, does that help? Bruce, was that good?
I think it's pretty behind time, so it might be a minute for Luke to catch up.
Oh, I see. You. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's go back to Alfonso's question. Are those recipes known in the industry, and are we going to learn how to design objects? I touched on this a little bit, I think, before you joined. by the names that we're calling them here, HTDF and HTDD, those aren't the names that are known in the industry. What we've tried to do is take some best practices that are well known and pull them all together in a sort of simple introductory package. So test-driven development is known, data modeling is known, incremental development is known, structuring your code according to a decomposition of types is known. So all the techniques that you're going to learn are known, but they're not going to end up being called HTDF and HTDD. At the end, in some sense, what you'll see by the time we get to the end of the course is magically what will happen is that the details of the recipe will kind of go away for you. And what will matter more is the structure that you know how to follow in order to write a well-tested and easy-to-read program. Oh, hang on, Alfonso had one more question about are we going to learn how to design objects? We're not going to do any explicit object-oriented programming in course 1 and 2. That'll come up starting in course 3. Oh, so OJM has a question called, looking ahead, does the recipe approach and orthogonality continue to apply to more complex functions involving hybrid situations, i.e. arrays within structures, structures within arrays, etc.? This is a great question. I'm just thinking about how best to answer it. Do I still have my Racket?
Yeah, you should be disconnected.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to go back over here to Racket. Okay. So I can't pull up a whole example of this nature, but let me just do this. What you're going to see later on in the course is that, for example, we're going to let you write something like this. List of airplane is one of empty airplane list of airplane. And notice the difference between this and list of number. Notice the difference between list of airplane and list of number is that right here in list of airplane, we have a type that was programmer defined as opposed to primitive. Number is a primitive type. This is a programmer defined type. And the result of that is going to be that whenever we have a template for list of airplane, I'll just call it LOA. Because that right there is a non-primitive type, we're going to have a rule here in the template that says fun for airplane. Which basically says, you know, you have to go call a function on airplane. And what this is going to do, OJM and everyone else, is this is going to handle the simplest category of cases that you're talking about. The two that you've actually named, where, for example, there's a list of arrays or an array of lists, are totally handled here. And what this template is saying is it's saying, well, make one function for the list and one function for the array, all each other. And that gives you a very nice program structure. Now, there's a whole more complicated category of cases, which we'll talk about starting in about the third or fourth week of course 2, which is something we call template blending, where what happens is instead of having a function for lists and a function for airplanes, you have 2 more complicated templates and you actually have to mush them together. And that's called template blending. And that's when we're really starting to try to get you ready for moving on to course 3. Because one of the fundamental results from the design patterns community is that design patterns don't exist in their pure form very often. They get blended or mushed together with other design patterns. So we're starting with the simple cases of types interacting and having separate functions. And then we're going to move on to the more complicated cases of templates interacting and being mushed together. So yeah, we're going to talk quite a lot about that. That's a great question, OJM. I'm looking at Erica, who's going to scroll. You got another one?
I don't think we have any more yet. You can go back to my Andrews from the discussion post.
Hang on, I'm just going to check to see if anybody's updated the discussion post.
I've been refreshing it.
Oh, Erica says she's been refreshing it. So another question that Andrew has is, after running a function in development, i.e. after running tests, check expecs on a function, it usually says no signature violations detected. And I guess my question is, Andrew, what language are you set in? Because while that is a thing that Racket sometimes says, I find that it doesn't say that if you're set to BSL, because that's actually a feature from the underlying Racket as opposed to a feature from BSL. So maybe you could let us know exactly where you're seeing that. Okay, it says here you're running BSL, but I don't know quite where you're seeing that.
I think it comes up in the check expect.
Oh, does it come up in the check expect box if there's a failing test?
I think so.
Hang on. But there's my check expect box.
Does it not come up? I feel like I've seen that before.
I feel like I've seen it before, but I think I only see it. Let me get a failing test here. Oh yeah, no, there it is. There it is, in fact. Yeah, so I'm actually going to argue that that's just a bug in the test window. There is an optional signature mechanism that Racket includes, but BSL doesn't include it. We don't use it, and so you shouldn't be seeing that message. You could complain. You could go to the Racket help desk. You could go here and submit a bug report.
We don't have more, but said things.
Does anybody want to know any more about the MicroMasters, or does anybody want to know about what's coming in some of the other courses? Let me tell you about a thing that we're developing for the MicroMasters, and maybe you can give us some feedback on it. One of the things that we've gotten some feedback on and that we're starting to work on that'll be in the verified track is some career support and some looking for a job support. We know that a lot of people taking this MicroMasters are looking to transition into software development as a new career. And so what we're doing is we're working with a local company to get some of their recruiters and some of their technical managers to talk some about what they're looking for in interviews, how interviews work, what new positions are like, what it's like to start working for a company. And we're also working with some students here who run a a sort of interview preparation workshop and interview practice workshop to develop some material about that. So we're going to be sharing some of that. We've also got a student who used to be a TA in the class and is now working in San Francisco, talking about what her experiences have been. And we're hoping that's something that, that you all will find useful. We haven't produced all that content yet, so now would be a particularly opportune time to give us some suggestions about what to put into that content. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
That'll take a minute for the lag to catch up.
Oh, right, Erica says I have to wait for a while because you guys are running. I'll do like this, and then we'll, on the other screen, we'll see when I wave. Okay. Oh, yeah, so it looks like you guys are interested in that. Do you have any suggestions for what we might include? Okay, I'm starting to see some answers to my request for suggestions. If you don't think of it now, that's fine, but maybe, you know, do post on the discussion forum in that, because as I say, we're just now designing and producing that content, and certainly now is the easier time to change it than once it's been produced. Oh, what was I about to talk about? What about these online office hours? We've got only about 6 or 7 people now. If you got some thoughts about what better times would be or better formats would be, please let us know. I think as we get farther in the course, you're going to start to have more detailed questions about actual problems that you're working on. And so if you could kind of post your code sort of up to the place where you got before you got stuck, if you could post that into the discussion thread, then what that would let me do is before the Hangout, I could kind of load up my Dr. Racket with those, and we could work through those as specific problems. So OJM suggests that we could give preliminary introduction to prospective employers. Do you mean by that we would help you connect up with a prospective employer? Or do you mean by that we would talk about what it's like to work in different places? I think the time lag for communication to the moon is shorter.
Probably.
Yeah, that's me saying that.
Yeah.
So there's a question here, which is, why are you going to use TypeScript for the last 2 courses? Erica, do you want to answer that?
That's the language that those courses. Hello, I'm Erica. I have an answer for this. We haven't got fully developed the 3rd course yet, and there's someone else that works more, or the 5th and 6th courses, someone else that works more on that than me. But TypeScript is the language that we use for that course in its UBC version, and that works out really well for the students. Do you have a specific, like when you say why, are you saying why is like that's a bad thing or a good thing? It is statically typed, so it's like a statically typed version of JavaScript. Are you familiar with it, or? Yeah, it's building up from Java in the 3rd and 4th courses. So you'll see Java in those courses, and then it'll be TypeScript after that. So it's kind of building from BSL, which is obviously much more lightweight language.
Okay, we're going to jump back here. Having answered the TypeScript question, Alfonso has answered us about his suggestion about, or no, OJM has answered us about my question about what you wanted in terms of matchmaking between us and between you and employers. You know, we haven't thought specifically about that, in part because you know, that would be a thing that we kind of a little bit have to do off to the side, because your learner data isn't something we're going to share with people. But certainly, a couple companies who have talked about, we have one that's already endorsed the program, and another company that we're talking to about endorsing the program. They certainly have an interest in you know, learning about some of the keenest students in this program. So let us look at that and get back to you on that. I mean, one of the real goals of the MicroMasters is supposed to be to support career transition. So anything we can do to help you with that, let us work on that. I'm waiting to see if any other questions come in. I think I've answered all of Andrew's, and okay, Andrew says he's keen, and Gibson says, or DeWitt says, you know, that he's happy with the simplicity of the beginning student language. I'm glad that's working for you. Some people, as you've seen on the forums, would prefer that we be using, you know, Java, except for the people who would prefer we use JavaScript, except for people who prefer we use ... We're really pretty sold on using this very simple language, and I think you'll see in the last week of this class, we'll be able to take a language you maybe have never seen, like Python, and I think you'll find that you can kind of read it anyways, even though you'd never seen it, just building on what you know from BSL. I think what we'll do is, I think we'll probably wrap up now. So Eric and I have some learning, and I think we all have some learning about how to make these most effective. We don't know why it took us 3 laptops to use it this time, but we next time will be ready to have it work at exactly the time we start. So our apologies for that. The feedback I would provide you all is, if we could get more questions ahead of time and questions with code fragments in them that you may be struggling with, that would give us some material to talk about. Because of the long time lag, it isn't working very well for us to answer questions that get asked here. Oh, there is one that just came in, so I'll answer it quickly in sort of a parenthetical comment. DeWitt's asking, does check_expect lead to JUnit in Java? And the answer is exactly. Check_expect is a simple unit testing framework. JUnit is a really complicated unit testing framework. The important thing to learn how to use is unit testing. And then, you know, the exact tool that you use to do it will depend on the language that you're in. Jumping back to my wrap up. So if you could get us more questions ahead of time next time, then I'll have more to kind of talk about, and I won't have to pause. It seems like there's probably about an almost 60-second delay between my saying something and you all hearing it. So asking for questions in real time seems to be not working quite as well. Or just, you don't have to put the questions on the discussion forum, just have them ready to ask and start shooting them off as chats. And then Erica can pick them out and we'll go that way. Here's one more question from Alfonso. It's about jobs. For some of us interested in getting the MicroMaster, is it possible to access the UBC job database? I think we probably can't do that for people who have not actually come all the way here for the masters. But certainly, as I said, we are working with employers who are interested in endorsing the MicroMasters, and I think edX is going to be doing something in this space. If you get the MicroMasters and you do well in it, then the truth of the matter is in the current world, the employers are looking for you. You're not looking for them. People who do well in this MicroMasters, people want to talk to and hire, and they can't get enough of them. So I think getting there will definitely open some doors, and we'll look at more about what we can do to try to connect people up. But we're gonna have to look at that a bit carefully because there's various privacy laws and other things that would apply there. We certainly would never want to share your information without you having explicitly asked us to do that. So I think I'll wrap up there. We'll do this again in 2 weeks. We're going to try to pick a different time each time so that it's the convenience of it moves around the world. Please post to the thread any feedback you have so we can do it better next time. As I said, I think we were a little bumpy on the technology this time, but we'll do it better next time. And above all, thanks for being in the course. Thanks for being a verified learner in the course. And thanks for participating in the first Hangout. We'll see y'all later. Bye.